There's a phrase that came out of the White House last night that almost nobody caught. A phrase that tells you more about where this Iran situation is really headed than any official statement ever could. And I want to explain what it means. Before we dive in, drop the country you're watching from in the comments. I read them. I want to see where everybody's tuning in from today. So there's this report that broke from NBC News late yesterday. And on the surface, it sounds like just another inside Washington headache. President Trump reportedly exasperated with his advisors. No consensus on Iran. Bickering in the Situation Room. And honestly, you've heard that tune before, right? You've seen the headlines about infighting. You've scrolled past the administration divided stories 100 times. But this time is different. And I'm going to explain why. Because there's one sentence buried in that NBC report that made me stop, that made me go back and read it 3 times. And once you hear it, you're going to understand why this isn't just another day of palace intrigue. This is a warning. The line came from a U.S. official, and I'm going to read it to you exactly. They said the U.S. is facing, quote, a strategic defeat without clear policy guidance. Strategic defeat. Think about those 2 words for a second. That isn't a White House that's frustrated about a bad headline. That is a White House that's admitting out loud to a reporter that there is no plan. That the most powerful military on earth, the one that's been engaged in this conflict for months now, doesn't have a clue where it's going. And the President of the United States is supposedly exasperated by that. Now, you and I both know what that word really means, don't you? Exasperated isn't just annoyed. It's not just frustrated. Exasperated is the feeling you get when you've tried everything and nothing works. When the people you hired to fix a problem keep coming back with the same broken answers. When you're sitting at the head of the table and you ask a simple question like, how do we end this? And you get a room full of silence. That's the energy coming out of Washington right now. But here's what nobody is talking about. Here's the detail the networks are glossing over. This report didn't just say there was disagreement. It said there was no real strategy for how to reach an endpoint. An endpoint. That means we are in a conflict right now with American military personnel in harm's way, that the commander-in-chief and his top advisors do not know how to finish. They don't have a plan for the end. They don't have an off-ramp. They're just in it, doing stuff, reacting, and hoping something changes. And the guy in charge is reportedly, quote, exasperated. Let me back up for a second, because I know some of you might be thinking, okay, this is politics. Administrations always have disagreements. And you're right. That's normal. That's healthy. Good leaders have robust debates. But what's happening here isn't debate. It's paralysis. An unnamed ally of the president told NBC that Trump didn't intend for this to be a long, drawn-out war. That's important. That tells you the gap between what he expected and what is actually happening on the ground. He didn't intend for this. Nobody in that room intended for this. But intention doesn't matter in war. You know what matters? What you actually do. The choices you actually make. The strategy you actually execute. And by their own admission, there isn't one. Now I want you to think about that for a moment. Put yourself in that situation. You're the leader of a country. You've got a conflict brewing in the Middle East. Your military advisors are telling you different things. The intel is a mess. The region is a powder keg. And every decision you make has the potential to drag your country deeper into something you never wanted. That's the position the president is in. But here's where it gets even more concerning, because this report isn't just about frustration. It's about unity, or the complete lack of it. A U.S. official told NBC that after all this time, there is no unity. All this time. Think about that phrase. How long has the U.S. been dealing with Iran? Decades. How long have they been specifically in this current escalation? Months. And after all of that, there's still no consensus. There's still no agreed upon path forward. That is not normal. And what's really weird is that when the White House was asked about this, Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt came out with a very standard denial. She said the president has a great team whom he trusts. Nice and tidy, all smiles. Nothing to see here, folks. But here's the thing about that denial. It doesn't actually address the substance of what was reported. The report didn't say Trump didn't trust his team. It said he was exasperated that they couldn't agree. It said there was no unity. It said there was no clear strategy. So her statement that he has a great team that he trusts, that's not a contradiction. That actually lines up with the problem. You can trust people and still be furious with them. You can have a great team and still watch them fail to get on the same page. You can trust your advisors and still feel completely helpless. So the denial, it kind of confirms the whole thing, doesn't it? Now, let me get into what this actually means for the troops, for the region, for you. Because we have a tendency in this country to treat White House drama like it's a TV show, like it's a reality series. Oh, the president is frustrated with his generals. What's new? But this isn't a show. This is life and death. American service members are operating in that region right now. They're flying missions. They're on ships. They're in bases in countries that are directly adjacent to this conflict. And they are taking orders from a chain of command that, according to this report, cannot agree on the end game. That is a terrifying thought. Because military operations without a clear political objective, that's how you get mission creep. That's how you get a limited engagement that turns into a multi-year quagmire. That's how you get soldiers who signed up for one thing ending up in a situation nobody ever prepared for. That's how you get an end point that keeps moving further and further away. And the people who are supposed to prevent that, they can't agree on what to do next. Now, I want to go deeper on this because there's a history here that the headlines are ignoring. This isn't the first time the Trump administration has struggled with Iran strategy. Actually, you could argue that this is the defining theme of this entire chapter of U.S. foreign policy. The Iran conflict has been a knot that no one has been able to untie for decades. The nuclear program, the proxies, the rhetoric, the sanctions, the assassinations, the cyber attacks. It's a mess. But under this administration, the approach has been, well, let's call it unpredictable. Sometimes it's maximum pressure. Sometimes it's a willingness to talk. Sometimes it's saber rattling. Sometimes it's a quiet back channel. And for the advisors in that room, the people whose job it is to execute a strategy, that whiplash has to be debilitating. One day they're told to prepare for a major strike. The next day they're told to stand down. One week they're drafting a diplomatic framework. The next week they're told diplomacy is weak. So is it any wonder that there's no unity? Is it any wonder that the president is exasperated? He's getting exactly what he asked for. He created an environment where no one knows what the boss actually wants. Because the boss keeps changing his mind. And now, with the world watching, with Iran's nuclear program inching closer to weaponization, with the region on the edge of a wider war, we've got a president who can't get his own team to agree on the basics. Let me share what I think is the real problem here. And this is just me. This is just what I see when I look at this whole situation. The real problem isn't that the advisors disagree. The real problem is that the disagreement is now public. It's in the press. It's being talked about openly. And that, more than anything, telegraphs weakness. When your adversaries see that you can't agree on a strategy, what do you think they do? Do you think they get scared? Do you think they back down? No. They see an opening. They see chaos. They see a window. They see a country that is arguing with itself while they move forward with their own plans. That is what strategic defeat actually looks like. It's not just losing a battle. It's losing the deterrence. It's losing the fear. It's losing the credibility that says, don't test us. And Iran is testing that right now. You can bet they're testing that. So let's talk about who's winning and who's losing in this, because that's what you really want to know. That's the part that matters. Who wins? Well, Iran wins. Not because they're stronger, not because they're smarter, but because they have clarity of purpose. They know what they want. They want to survive. They want to lift sanctions. They want regional influence. They want to be seen as a power that can't be pushed around. And their strategy, whatever you think of it, is consistent. The United States, by contrast, looks like a country that doesn't know what it wants from this conflict. And that is a massive, massive gift to Tehran. Who loses? The American people lose. Our military loses. The credibility of the United States loses. And the wider world loses, because the one country that's supposed to be the reliable, steady hand, the country that's supposed to project strength and purpose, looks like it's making it up as it goes along. And look, I know some of you are going to say, but the president is putting America first. He's not trying to start a war. He wants to end it. And I get that. I understand that impulse. Nobody wants more war. Nobody wants more American boots on the ground. But here's the thing. Not having a strategy is not the same as being anti-war. Not having a strategy is not a policy. It's an abdication. You can't end a conflict by being exasperated. You can't win a strategic competition by being annoyed with your advisors. You need a plan. You need an endpoint. You need to know in your gut exactly what you're trying to achieve and what you're willing to sacrifice to get it. And right now, by their own admission, that doesn't exist. Now I want to move to the shockwaves part, because this isn't happening in a vacuum. This report hit right when the world is watching the Middle East like a hawk. Oil prices are volatile. Global shipping routes are threatened. European allies are nervous. China and Russia are watching, taking notes, seeing what they can get away with. The market reaction to this kind of uncertainty is real. Investors hate chaos. They hate not knowing what the policy is. And when you've got the President of the United States reportedly fuming behind closed doors, with no consensus among his generals, that is not a stable investment environment. But the markets aren't even the biggest concern. The biggest concern is what happens when the next crisis comes, because it's not like this is the last crisis. There is always going to be another incident, another proxy attack, another escalation, another intel scare. And if we can't handle this one, the one we're already in, how are we going to handle the next one? This is the moment where the system is supposed to work. This is the moment where the National Security Council is supposed to function, where the president is supposed to listen to his advisors, make a decision, and execute it. And instead, we're getting leaks to NBC about exasperation and strategic defeat. That is a failure of leadership. Not necessarily a failure of one person, but a failure of the process, a failure of the administration to get aligned, a failure to communicate a clear vision from the top. And I think that's why the press secretary's denial felt so hollow. She said he trusts his team. But trust isn't the issue. Alignment is the issue. Consensus is the issue. Clarity is the issue. Let me ask you a question, and I want you to be honest. When you think about the state of the world right now, does strategic defeat feel like an exaggeration to you? Think about it. We've got a conflict in Ukraine. We've got tensions in the South China Sea. We've got the Middle East in perpetual crisis. And the United States, the guy at the top, the guy with his finger on the button, the guy who is supposed to be the most powerful man in the world, is reportedly exasperated that his own advisors can't agree on the plan. That doesn't make me feel safe. That doesn't make me feel like we've got this under control. And I don't think I'm alone in that feeling. So let's talk about the bigger picture. Because this Iran situation, as serious as it is really just a symptom. It's a symptom of a deeper problem in American governance. And that problem is that our foreign policy is broken. Broken by partisanship. Broken by political expediency. Broken by an attention span that can't focus on one crisis long enough to see it through. Broken by a culture that values the quick win over the long game. And when you combine all that brokenness with a president who is operating from instinct rather than strategy, with advisors who are competing with each other rather than cooperating, with a Congress that is essentially irrelevant to foreign policy, what do you get? You get what we have. You get strategic drift. You get ad hoc decision-making. You get a situation where the most powerful country on earth is trying to navigate a minefield by guessing where the mines are. And that is terrifying. But here's what I want you to take away from this. This isn't a partisan attack. This isn't me saying one side is good and the other is bad. This is me saying that the system as it currently exists is failing. It is failing the troops. It is failing the country. It is failing the president himself, who clearly wants a way out that nobody can give him. This is about competence. This is about clarity. This is about having a plan. And right now, we don't have one. The turning point in this whole thing, the moment when this went from being an internal disagreement to a national crisis, was when that official used the phrase strategic defeat. Because that's not a slip of the tongue. That is someone, likely a career professional, who is so frustrated by the dysfunction that they are willing to go off the record and say what everyone is thinking. That is someone waving a red flag as hard as they can. And when you hear those words, you have to take them seriously. Because the people in that room know more than we do. They see the raw intelligence. They see the military assessments. They see the nuclear reports. And they are saying off the record that we are on a path to defeat. Not because the other side is better, but because we don't know what we want. Now, the president's defenders will say, look, he inherited this mess. Iran has been a problem for 40 years. You can't expect one administration to fix it. And that's true. You can't. But you can expect an administration to have a coherent strategy. You can expect them to be unified. You can expect them to communicate clearly to the world what the endpoint is. And they haven't done that. So what does this mean for the future? What comes next? Well, the cynical take is that this is just more of the same. More infighting, more leaks, more frustration, more status quo. But I don't think that's right. I think something has shifted. I think the fact that this is out there, the fact that a senior official is talking about strategic defeat out loud means the patience has run out. People are scared. People are worried. People are starting to think about the worst case scenarios. And that energy is going to bleed into everything. The interagency meetings, the intelligence briefings, the phone calls with allies, the messaging to the public. Everyone is going to be a little more tense, a little more worried, a little less likely to take risks. And in a moment like this, where you need boldness and clarity, tension and worry are the last things you want. So I'm going to leave you with this, and I want you to really feel the weight of it. The United States is in a conflict right now. We are actively engaged. American planes are flying. American ships are deployed. American lives are at risk. And the commander-in-chief, the person who is supposed to be the decisive voice at the table, the person who is supposed to break the tie, the person who is supposed to say, this is the plan, execute it, is exasperated. He's exasperated because his people can't agree. But here's the hard question, and I want you to sit with it. If the president can't get his own advisors to agree on the strategy, how is he going to get the rest of the world to agree to peace? How is he going to get Iran to the table if he can't even get his own generals in the same room? How is he going to project strength if his own team is leaking to the press about how broken everything is? The answer is he can't. And that is what keeps me up at night. That is why this report, buried in a routine news cycle, is more important than you think. This isn't about politics. This isn't about who's winning or losing the news cycle. This is about whether the United States of America, the country that is supposed to be the leader of the free world, actually knows what it's doing. And right now, by every account we've got, the answer is no. There's no unity. There's no strategy. There's no endpoint. There's just exasperation. And that's a dangerous place to be. I'll be watching this closely, and I'll bring you updates as things develop, because things are going to develop. They have to. You can't stay in a place like this forever. Something has to give. And when it does, you're going to want to understand what it means. So stay with me. I'll keep explaining what I see, and I'll keep giving it to you straight. We'll talk again soon.